should be joining in show about right now. I see they are joining in. So good morning, everyone. My name is Alessandro. I'm the managing director of U40, and today I am actually very, very happy to have this amazing panel here to discuss how tech and agriculture can make sure that rural areas around Europe are really at the forefront of this new digital revolution. I'm here with a lot of interesting personalities. We are here with MEP Isabel Benjumea, who is an MEP from Spain, and very interestingly, she also has a vineyard, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm sure she has a lot to say. Good morning, Isabel. Then I would like to say hi to Jorge, who is a member in the cabinet of the Commissioner for Agriculture. Thank you, Jorge, for being here. Jorge is actually the person that has in his portfolio the smart villages, which is something very, very interesting that we are discussing today. I would like to say hello to Geraldine, who is working at ECPA. She is the head of ECPA, so thank you very much for being here. And then to Simone, hi Simone, who is the Vice President of the Young Farmers Association. After this very, very short introduction of all the speakers, I would like just to frame a bit the discussion, and then all of the speakers will have about 3 minutes to make opening statements, and then we keep it very informal. We rotate a few questions around, and all the participants can actually ask questions through the Q&A button, or if they are watching from YouTube, they can actually send in questions from Twitter. And without further ado, I would like to start by saying that I myself come from a mountain area, so originally in Italy. So I know how much it is complicated to live in such areas for a variety of reasons. It's fantastic, mountains, amazing landscapes, but also it's important to bring those areas really in the 21st century, as our title is. So I would like to start with Isabel, who is the Vice Chair of the Regional Development Committee in the European Parliament. Isabel, how can we make sure that the various regions of Europe are going all at the same speed? And in this sense also, like, what is the role that you see in technology applied to agriculture, but also to other areas? How can we make sure that this technology really helps us bring those in the 21st century?
Good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And one of the things I really like is that you introduced me as the owner of a vineyard, which is my real passion, and it's where if I ever get lost, you can easily find me in the countryside, in the vineyard. So I really like it. Just to use these 3 minutes to give an overview. I think that this huge and terrible health crisis that we are still suffering, and that has caused a lot of deaths in Europe, but also will produce, and is already producing, a huge social and economic impact, has shown how important for the economies are the rural areas of Europe, and are the different regions that focus their main economical activity in the agriculture, also in cattle, or in the different pieces of the chain that produce all the things that the big cities need in order to go shopping. So to make it simple. But truth to be said is that during this confinement, we've realized that those who had better access to internet, who had better access to technology, who had better capacities, who had better training, were able to develop easily their jobs in these tough circumstances. And it has shown, and I'm speaking from, because the region I know better, of course, is Spain, but I've also had the chance to speak with different associations from Italy, from Portugal, and from France. So I do apologize, I don't have a huge overview, but I think I have enough from the south. It has shown that many regions still are not prepared for the digitalization for the digital area. It has proved, oh, I'm very sorry because I'm at home, so I'm very sorry about the terrible sound of the phone. This is one of the things about digitalization and being at home that you get the sound, so I'm very sorry. So first of all, that we realize that many regions are not prepared. Second is that we have a huge opportunity to invest. And one of the things that I'm very, very, very keen, especially right now with the program of React EU in the Regional Development Committee, which is the package, the new cohesion package for the recovery plan, is that we need to invest in technology applied for agriculture, technology applied for the rural areas, technology that can allow us to be more competitive, allow us to be competitive not only within the European Union, but also in the global world. And for that, we need to do two things. We need to understand and we need to invest in entrepreneurs. We need to invest in small and medium enterprises. And we need, which is very, very important, to create the framework, the digital framework that will allow these regions to be in the global world. I'm very sorry, in the global world, and be able to offer their products and compete. So my first impression is that this is an opportunity, but we really need to be able to put the regions as a priority in terms of giving the digital framework and in terms of giving SMEs and entrepreneurs the investment they need. And I'm very sorry. This is the so I think I finally was able to close the line. So and right now, for instance, I'm in the countryside. I'm in the rural area of Extremadura. It's been very difficult for me to be able to connect in all the things that I had to connect during the confinement. Right now, in the 21st century, in 2020, there are areas of Spain that we don't have connectivity, for the cell phone, that we don't have access to internet. And if we really want to say that we want to take care of the rural areas, we want to take care of agriculture, we want to take care of the regions, first of all, we need to develop the real digital framework. But again, investment in entrepreneurs, investment in innovation, and investment in SMEs, which are the ones who create jobs and create opportunities. So we'll have people willing to live in the rural areas and willing to develop alive in the rural areas. And I'm very sorry about the phone. This is the things about being at home that they keep ringing once you hang up. I'm very sorry.
Absolutely, Isabel. No worries. It is actually the life of an MEP. We get an insight of receiving hundreds of calls every second minute. Thank you, Isabel. And exactly on this, I would like to go to Jorge, who is in his portfolio, as I was mentioning, has not only long-term visions for rural areas. So this is actually very, very much in line with what Isabel was saying, but also smart villages and digitalization. Jorge, I would like to know from your side, Farm to Fork, very, very big initiative of the Commission that is coming out, and I'm sure Geraldine later will tell us also on her perspective what this means. What are the plans of the Commission to make sure that we are really going forward in a way that no one is left behind?
Thank you, and Alessandro, and good morning to everyone, and thank you for this invitation. For me, it's an opportunity to engage in the debate with all of you, but specifically, I guess, to hear also from your views, because as you mentioned, we just recently started putting forward some of our major initiatives, namely the Farm to Fork, which is a key piece of the European Green Deal. And there we have ambitious goals, which of course we can only accomplish those if we are all on the same line and we know what is the direction of travel. And as part of these big initiatives, of course, digital will play a key role, we believe, because we know that digital has the potential to contribute to sustainability, namely through precision agriculture. But we also know that digital has the potential to increase the overall efficiency of farming. And it also has, I guess, more broadly, the potential to support the development of rural areas and the businesses opportunities in rural areas. What we started with the Smart Villages initiative, I think, has created a momentum, and this is just an illustration of what can be done. But of course, it is a momentum that we need to seize. But to do this, there are a number of challenges out there that we obviously as policymakers need to address. I think the previous intervention, Isabel was already alluding to some of those briefly. We have obviously the issue of the digital gap and issues regarding broadband accessibility. Right now in the EU, there is a divide in this regard, whereas in urban areas we have connections to high-speed internet. It's about 86% in the EU. In rural areas, it's still only 53%. So this is an imbalance, and it's an imbalance in connectivity, but it's, I think, more pertinent for all of us. It's an imbalance in terms of opportunities. So we obviously need to address these challenges if we really want to unlock the full potential of digital in agriculture. And the other aspect, which I think was also somehow touched upon by Isabel, so it's good for us to see that we are on the same line, was actually, I think, the issue of skills. We cannot fully exploit the opportunities of digital if we still have an insufficient level of knowledge in terms of skills. And this is particularly the case, again, in rural areas. Only where there's still about 42%, so it's a large number, has an insufficient elements in terms of digital skills. So I think for us, and what I'm also very interested in participating in these discussions, is to understand how do we all see the opportunities out there, but how can we ensure that some of the different instruments and the different policies that the Commission has put out there can constitute a powerful framework that supports digitalization, but supports more broadly agriculture and supports also more broadly the sustainability challenges that we see out there. I think part of our responses, part of our debate will possibly touch upon fostering and supporting research and innovation. We have a good track record out there. I would point out to the initiative on the European Innovation Partnership on Agricultural Productivity and the number of working groups that have taken up this challenge and have produced quite a lot of good information and best practices and guidance and ideas on how we could go forward. We've also, as part of the Commission, of course, put out there a network of broadband competence offices, which provides some technical assistance to rural areas and farmers. And also as part of the CAP, of the CAP, we've also tried to increasingly, as part of our agricultural knowledge and innovation systems, emphasize the role of digitalization. So all of these, of course, will have to continue, but they need to be supported further. And I think more recently, you've mentioned, of course, the farm to fork, which I guess we will have the opportunity to go a little bit more in detail. But I would also like to highlight the Europe Fit for the Digital Age, the common data space on agriculture, which I think it's an important undertaking and could be a major part of our dialogue in terms of both sustainability, but also digitalization of agriculture. So for us, and as part of our next steps, of course, we will have to look at how can we emphasize these issues under the CAP strategic plans that member states will send to the Commission. We have also started last year the preparatory action on smart rural areas, which has the potential to bring about guidance, technical assistance, but also strategies for some of these areas. And you've also, Alessandra, I guess, touched upon, which is also part of my portfolio, the long-term vision for rural areas, which will come up on the second quarter of 2021, where I think digital will also be a part of this agenda. So we have the tools there. We, I guess, have also the direction of travel, but now we need to articulate those. And I think it's the importance of this debate is this.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Jorge. I think what you touched upon is exactly what we're going to discuss now. What is the way forward? And on this note, I would like to hear from Geraldine, who is the Director General of the European Crop Protection Association. We have heard from politics. We have heard from policy. Now, Geraldine, what is your take on this, and how do you think politics can really help you in your sector to make a difference?
Thank you, Alessandro, and good morning to all of you. Thanks for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. We are convinced that innovation is really the way forward in achieving a more sustainable agriculture. And this is why we really support the measures and the strong calls that the Commission is doing in the Green Deal and in the Farm to Fork for more innovation. There are no silver bullets when it touches on sustainable agriculture, but clearly digital and precision ag are a key tool in achieving a more sustainable agriculture. Perhaps the easiest way to understand precision and digital ag is to think of it as everything that makes the practice of farming more accurate and controlled when it comes to the growing of crops or raising livestock. It includes using digital tools such as GPS guidance, control system, sensor, or robotics. Just the other day, I saw a video of a young farmer showing the inside of her tractor. It didn't look like my car. No, it looked like what we see in spaceships. It's amazing, the technology that is embarked in tractors today. I think in general, the general public tends to have a kind of romantic idea about agriculture, and it's heavily underestimated how much knowledge goes into growing our food and the amount of information farmers have to process to assess the situation in the field and make the right decisions. Cutting-edge sustainable agriculture requires lots and lots of information to grow food and protect the environment at the same time. Let me give you a few examples on how digital agriculture has already allowed a decrease in agricultural ecological footprint, and then talk about maybe a couple of advances that need to be made in order for the farming sector to deliver on the Farm to Fork goals. For instance, farmers use software and satellite imaging of crops, allowing yield mapping. This technology shows which area can give you the most potential, but it also can help you identifying the areas that can be potentially set aside for hedges or dedicated to biodiversity conservation. They can also use diagnostic apps. These help farmers get the right information, identify where the pests and diseases are. It allows obviously to minimize the usage of pesticides, so they are used at the right time, in the right place, in a targeted way, meaning as little as possible and only when necessary. So what has to be done in order to deliver on the promise of digitalization in the Farm to Fork? But sometimes it's difficult for the legislator to foresee the future of innovation. And sometimes the reality is that innovation outpaces regulation because it goes very fast. For example, the European Commission's legal interpretation of drone application of pesticide equates to an aerial spraying. It can't be further from the truth, as drone application is a very targeted way of applying pesticides. Nothing to do with aerial spraying, for instance. But how could the Commission have imagined when drafting the text of the Sustainable Use Directive in 2008, 2009, then 10 years later, drones will be used by Amazon to deliver packages to consumers, so let alone used for farmers to apply pesticides. So maybe just to conclude this introductory remark, arguably the most important thing for farmers is to access a large toolbox, including digital tools. But without a good and reliable access to the internet, as it has been mentioned by Isabel and Jorge, there won't be any digital farming. The reality is access to high-speed internet is very heterogeneous across Europe. So we need to tackle these very basic things, access to broadband internet. Therefore, obviously, we support the Commission aim to increasing access to broadband internet. And without it, the digital resolution will not reach the rural agricultural areas. So before, thinking about tools, thinking about GPS access or robotics or digital technology is very important, but we need to have the basics. And the basic is really access to broadband internet everywhere at any time.
Absolutely, I think Geraldine, this goes even beyond the agricultural sector per se. It's really like something that in rural areas it's necessary for even for getting connected to a Zoom call during the lockdown. So it's really like the core. On this, I would like to welcome Simone, who's joining us all the way from Sweden. Simone is the Vice President of the European Council of Young Farmers, as I was mentioning earlier. And Simone was telling me this morning that he is himself very much involved in this, and he lives in a rural area. So Simone, on your side, as a young farmer, and then as a representative of all the young farmers of Europe, how do you think this is, do you think this is enough, what we have? Do you see the light at the end of the tunnel? Or what could we do better in Brussels to make sure that you have what you need in order to make your job?
Thank you very much, Alessandro. Hello and good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. Very pleased to speak on behalf of myself, but also on behalf of about 2 million young farmers who are a part of our association. As mentioned, we represent about young farmers from about 33 countries around Europe. So, yeah, as you said myself, yeah, I work with farming on a daily basis, and we use a lot of technology today. And this is, of course, very much thanks to that we have high-speed broadband, and we can use a lot of internet-based technology. I operate on a large farm. I am employed as an estate manager, so we have about 900 hectares, consisting of 550 which is tilled, and then another 350 which is permanently grazed with both dairy, beef cattle, and beef sheep. And to be able to manage such a large farm today, and also doing that in a good way, if you'd say, where you're making sure that you're not losing too much money, if you would put it that way. You need to have the technology, and you also need to have people working with you that are very much interested and also have the right education in using all this technology. And that's probably the most important thing if I'm going to tell you, people who are working in Brussels, what we need to have in order to make sure to do this. Of course, first, access to the internet, that has already been said, access to broadband. Also making sure that there are possibilities for both young people, but also older people who working with agriculture to get the right type of education to use technological instruments and so on. And also making sure that there is possibilities around these people so that they are able to live in the rural areas. Because if they're not able to live there, it's going to be harder to work there as well. And this varies a lot. But if you look at Sweden, about 2% of the population in Sweden work with farming on a full-time basis. It's quite a large group that doesn't do it, meaning that a lot of the people are moving away from the countryside. And that is also leading to that a lot of the towns and other smaller cities in rural areas are losing much of the necessities that are needed to be able to live there. For our members within CESA, this differs quite a lot, but yes, indeed, access to broadband is necessary to use it, because we can also see that younger people are, of course, more willing to adapt and use new technologies. So there is a large group of young farmers who are sitting there and just waiting to be able to use the systems that they have already maybe have bought. They have maybe bought it already, but they are not able to use it because they are missing, for example, access to broadband.
Yeah, I think Simone, your testimony as a representative of 2 million farmers around Europe is really valuable, because I mean it's in the end all we do is for the European citizens. That is in the end what the goal is. I would like to ask to Isabel a question that is coming from Twitter, which is mainly, they are asking, like, how can we make sure that at a political level there is an incentive for companies to invest in rural areas? Because sometimes it's true, in rural areas, especially in agriculture and in transport, it doesn't make sense for some to go all the way up to the mountains and bring internet there to make sure that everyone is capable of doing their job. How can the European Parliament, and being you the Vice Chair of the Regional Development Committee, I think you have a lot to say in here.
Well, Simon just said it, that in order to have people living in the rural areas, there need to be opportunities in the rural areas to have a job, to create an enterprise, to have the chance to develop your family and have schools for the kids and opportunities. So I truly believe that from the Regional Development Committee perspective, which we handle a huge amounts and they are invested through the funds, need to be invested in creating the needed framework for those opportunities to grow in terms of infrastructures, which it haven't been mentioned, but they are essential as well. We need these areas need to be accessible. That's a very important. That's an important thing. Then investing in what we just mentioned, the digital framework, so that everybody can have access to a good quality and cheap internet, which I think is very important. Also investing in education, so that everybody can have access to the skills in case they want to have them. And which is very important, I truly, and I've always defended, but that's not a responsibility of the European Union, it's responsibility of the member states. I truly believe that tax incentives are a very interesting tool to attract companies to establish themselves in the rural areas. Have tax incentives for those who decide to invest outside of the big cities in terms of taxation, not only for the company, but also for the knowledge, for the experts, for the brains that want to go to the rural areas and develop tax incentives for them. I truly believe that if we create that, if we have the investment, if we have the governments creating these incentives for the rural areas, it'll be easier to create opportunities in the rural areas, in agriculture, but also in many other sectors that are linked to the agriculture and that are needed in the rural areas. So I'm very, very sure that the opportunities come from the private sector, but we need to create the right framework for the private sector to decide to invest and to create opportunities in these areas. So that would be, like, very shortly the key instruments. I'm very, very little friend of subsidizes, which are needed for the beginning, but I believe much more in investing and creating the opportunities for the private sector to come and create jobs and opportunities.
Absolutely, Isabel. I think this is the point, and I would like to hear from Geraldine on this point, and then Jorge. Geraldine, if you can answer to what Isabel has just said, and also together we put a question that is coming from the chat, who is sent from an Italian who says, how can we make sure that the digitalization in agriculture has a positive impact on the development of a more sustainable agriculture? I think, Geraldine, this is something that you could answer.
Sorry, I have to unmute myself. Clearly, this digitalization would be important for a more sustainable agriculture, because we can really target what we want to do. So, for instance, 90% of the tractors in the EU are equipped with satellite technology. Whether they use it or not is a different question, but 90% of the tractors are equipped with this technology. So the benefits, it's clear. First of all, it saves fuel, so greenhouse gas emissions. Second, it can also reduce, for instance, the use of pesticide or fertilizers, because you have a more targeted application where it's needed. You can do that with tractor, but if you do that with drones, you are even more targeting. You don't use any fuel at all, and you really target the plant, the crop that you need to treat before the pest expand. So it's a quick reaction. It's very targeted. It saves time to the farmer, which is also very important. The farmer doesn't have to go to the field and look for the parcel that is infected. With drones, they can go directly with there and treat the parcel. So I think we have a lot of benefits from that. On top of that, I think, there is a lot of data that has been generated in the agricultural sector, and we need to give access to this data to the farmers, and we need rules for that. We need clear rules for that. And sometimes we think about the digital sector as, a very high-tech sector, very far away from agriculture. And when you listen to debate about the right of Facebook to use your personal data, it seems very remote from the agriculture sector, but it's not. And in fact, in 2018, 9 agri-food chain associations signed the Code of Conduct on agricultural data sharing. So it's a set of good practices on who can use the data, how to use the data, and I think it will be absolutely key in the future as more and more digital technologies will develop.
Thank you, Geraldine. And then later you can tell us also like how the private sector can really invest in this. But before that, I would like to go to Jorge because there is one question which is related to how and how much and what opportunities for cooperations between member states and farmers in member states the Commission is supporting, and also what Geraldine was saying was also related to whether the Commission is coming with more regulation, with clearer regulation on the variety of topics that are related to agriculture, especially in rural areas.
Thank you, Alessandro. I would also start maybe by touching on the pertinent first question, where because we tend to not that I have a full reply to this on what are the incentives in terms of rural areas. We have some clues. We have some ideas. We've started some initiatives which are public, and I suspect by next year, when we have the long-term vision for rural areas, we have a bit more clarity and degree of granularity in terms of what could be some of these incentives that we should put in place for rural areas. One of them, I think, it's also, and which something that is coming already, and as a concept that has been gaining any momentum, which is this idea of rural proofing. The idea that we need to understand what are the implications for rural areas of some of our decisions, and namely investments decisions. So I think this could be one specific instrument, a policy instrument that we could have in terms of really encouraging the development of rural areas. I think it's also important to realize that we cannot speak about rural areas just as sort of a homogeneous sort of concept. In the EU, obviously, some rural areas are quite thriving places where we have a number of very successful businesses, very successful small and medium enterprises, but also big enterprises. So it's not throughout the whole of Europe that we have the same pictures as regards challenges. But of course, in a number of rural areas in Europe, we do have some challenge in terms of the population, for instance, which we obviously need to address. And we are doing this as part of our programs, of our public investments. So I think this is also part of the equation. We also need to look at the role, of course, of member states in this regards. I think the Commission can only go so far in putting sometimes the sort of the general frameworks in place and putting in place some instruments, some financial envelopes, but a lot and will have to be undertaken and implemented by member states. I would pick up on the fact that, for instance, when we look at the digital, only 14 member states have actually in the past included broadband as part of their R&D programs. So there is still a way to go in this regard. Now,
yeah,
coming to the question in terms of opportunities for cooperation, I would, for instance, bring into the conversation the European Innovation Partnership on Agricultural Productivity, which has created about in excess of 3,000 working groups in the EU, where farmers, but also other stakeholders with relevance to this debate have engaged in debate, but also in very practical initiatives which can spur cooperation between different stakeholders. So this is one way for us that we should be looking more in detail. And then, of course, opportunities for cooperation. I think it's also part of our sort of a broad arsenal in terms of technical assistance, because I think this is also key. We know, or we have a very good idea of what are the best practices out there, what are the initiatives, what are the tools that work, but in a lot of circumstances, these have not trickled down to the local level or all throughout the EU. So we need to make sure that what we, or most of us, or the best of us know about the direction of travel, that this also trickles down to the local level and to the farmer working in his field. And for us, this is about reinforcement of the agriculture knowledge and innovation systems, which is something that we really think should be as an opportunity for us to cooperate with member states and to make sure that also member states and the Commission are also cooperating with the final users, which is the farming community.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Jorge. I will come back to that in a second, because I wanted to pick up on something that you said earlier and also Isabel mentioned earlier, which is related to how much technology is important, but also the upskilling is important, and also the replacement of that technology. So I wanted to ask Simon, as someone that has to implement this, because we talk maybe sometimes on a theoretical level, but then the people that have actually to put in place these changes. So I wanted to ask Simon, how complicated it is to adapt to a new technology when it comes, and also you represent obviously the young farmers, but I would like to understand how big do you think this new technology will make an impact on the older generation of farmers, and whether your organization can help the older generation of farmers to really enter into the 21st century?
Yes, I'll start with the last question that you answered. If you look at the farm that I operate on, my team, we are 17 people in total who run the farm, with various areas of working. But my youngest member is 25, and my oldest member is 62. And if you just look among ourselves within the group, we have so many we have so much value in learning from each other. Like when it comes to the new technology, of course, usually the younger members of the staff adapt earlier and quicker, and they then work as very good teachers when it comes to telling our older members of the staff. But then it's the opposite when it comes to knowledge on a more technological, like machinery, equipment, when it comes to fixing machinery, or when it comes to the crop production or herding the animals. Then it's the top down. It's the older members of the staff who have a lot of experience. Well, they can then download that to the younger people. So it's a lot of, it goes back and forth within the team. I would say within my team that everybody's very interested in adapting and learning, because everybody is very driven on making sure that we get the most out of what we do. As Geraldine said earlier, it's kind of always making sure that you do the right thing in the right place at the right time. Because and when everybody has that same goal, because of course, I'm going to be honest with you, we have put so many hours into sitting down and making sure that we are on the same level on how we run the business. And that was a lot of hard work, took a lot of hours, but we are now on the way in the same direction as a team. And then it's much easier when we make the decisions, because it's not only me who makes the decisions on what to use and what to not use. The other day, a member of my staff just came in and said, well, there's this new program that we can just put into one of our tractors that we already have, and it can work, it can help us improve this and this and this. And I was like, okay, let's look into that. And then we just discussed that around the table, and we realized that, okay, this is going to be quite easy for us to implement, because everybody is already thinking about what they can do to use this program or this system. Because of course, we already have a lot of the basic technologies. As said, all our tractors have GPS satellite systems, which we use as much as possible. I'm going to be honest with you, you can use a GPS system in your tractor for things that you couldn't even imagine before, once you have it, because it makes everything so much easier. You have the sensors. We do not yet have the drone. We have a drone, but we don't use it for other things than just having overviews or inspecting fields and so on, inspecting animals, since it's compared to sitting on a quad driving around about 4 hours a day just to check your animals that are spread out all in 350 hectares. You just send your drone up and you do the same work in 45 minutes. So we basically use the drone maybe 2 or 3 days a week, and then we can just go on the quad the other days, making sure that we still have the natural contact with the animals. But it's just a way of using your time much more and much more intelligent ways.
I see Jorge as an answer on that one.
Yes.
No, I don't have an answer. I'm just maybe being provocative, because we are speaking a lot about, rightly so, about the new opportunities brought about by the amount of data that is out there, and all these opportunities for precision farming because of this new data and the way for us to interact. But it's also for us, I think, important to consider how can we make the most in terms of new businesses models from the data that we are gathering. So if we know that in Europe now, you know, your sort of run-of-the-mill tractor has already a sophisticated outputs in terms of information that is collecting. But the question then is now, how can we make the most of this? How can we create new businesses that will look into this data and that will help farmers to, you know, improve on how they go about in their daily businesses? So this should also be part of our conversation.
And on this, before I go to Isabel and Geraldine, I wanted to ask you, Jorge. So on this, on the how, for example, Isabel is a member of also the Smart Villages and Rural Areas Intergroup, who's trying to build this. In the Commission, you have now a person, which is you, who's dedicated to smarting and digitalizing rural areas. Is this enough? Should we need another European instrument? Should we need another industry instrument or an association that helps really the industry to make sure that this is played out nicely?
Well, I'm not sure you have me as the smart villages person, as I try to articulate what are the views of the Commissioner, Wojciechowski. And then, of course, we have the colleagues in DG Agri, which have been for a number of years taking this forward. I think in what I was saying for my sort of first introductory remarks, I think we have a good number of instruments already in place out there. I think this challenge is not so much to create new initiatives or new instruments, but rather to make sure that what we have actually sustains a strong framework, regulatory maybe also, but a strong framework that underpins then initiatives by the farming community, but also more businesses in general. So the question is, how do we make synergies and the most of what we already have there?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I have a question from the chat for Geraldine, but before I wanted to go to Isabel. Isabel, Darren is asking in the Q&A as well. So we've heard today from all the panelists, you included, Isabel, that we need really a cross-sectorial approach. How can we make sure that the barriers between, you know, politics, policy, and the industry is taken down? How can we make sure that we are collaborating properly? Do you have anything on this?
I mean, that's the big question for any sector right now. I mean, and especially as I was saying before, right now, I truly believe that to face this huge social and economic crisis that we'll be having, it's essential that all the efforts are joined and they are direct to tackle the problems of the citizens and offering solutions. As Jorge was saying before, we don't need to create many new instruments. We just need to make these instruments to be really useful and really targeted and have the right, for sure, budget, but the right directions and the right priorities. Well, it's the same with institutions. It's the same. I mean, we need the member states to work hand in hand with the European Commission. We need, because you need to understand that in order to have this real approach that gives the real solutions, we need to have the policies from the member states and the policies from the European Union all aligned into the same, into achieving the same objective. And sadly, that many times don't happen. So sometimes you have a really good initiative that starts in the European Parliament and is implemented by the European Commission, and then you find these objections from the member states for the reasons, but objections or the program, for instance, doesn't really implement in a certain member state. Well, that's very difficult, and especially when you have a lot of blocks in the chain, sometimes it's very difficult to achieve that result. But I truly believe that citizens must and will demand to us, for the policymakers, to make a simple regulation and make a joint effort for fast implementation and a 360 impact on any of the programs that we develop. And for me, Recovery Europe, the big program that the big budget that will be approved hopefully at the end of the July or beginning of September, and all the programs that will be, and all the initiatives that will start from Recovery EU, citizens will expect that to be efficient, that to be delivered in collaboration between member states and all the institutions at the European level. And if we do not achieve, if we do not deliver that, I'm sure that the citizens will demand responsibilities, because it's our duty to be able to deliver that. And that is very difficult, but definitely it should be achieved, because right now we need to move fast, and we need to bring investments and opportunities for the citizens very, very fast, and especially as we are talking right now in the rural areas, in the agricultural sector, but in all the sectors in the European Union. But it's true, the person who placed the question is very right. Right now, sometimes you find good initiatives that they don't deliver the right impact to the citizens because there's a miscommunication and there's the lack of collaboration between the authorities from member states and the European Union. So definitely we need to get over that and deliver the programs to the citizens in time.
Yeah, thank you, Isabel. I think miscommunication is always one big problem in every area. In the last 10 minutes, I take a lot of pride always being on time. When I say an hour, we will finish in an hour. I would like in the last 10 minutes to be a bit provocative, and I would like to start with Geraldine and ask her if you had one question for the policy makers, what would it be? Like, what would make a difference in the sector of the protection of crops, and obviously in the light of rural areas? What would be the one thing that you would like them to take into consideration out of this?
Sorry, I think, as I said, there is a lot of hope placed in the Farm to Fork Green Deal initiatives with respect to innovation. But I think my question would be, what kind of innovation the Commission is ready to promote, and how in practice the Commission intends to promote this innovation? Because we have seen in the past a tension between the precautionary principle and the innovation principle. Honestly, from our industry perspective, we are convinced that innovation can really help delivering a more sustainable agriculture. We don't think that going back to practices that were in place 100 years ago is a solution for a more sustainable agricultural practice in the context of today. And it's very nice to speak about innovation, and I don't think that anybody will be against innovation, but we would like to know in practice what kind of innovation the Commission is ready to promote.
Thank you, Geraldine. Jorge, what is the answer to this? And also, what is the one thing that you would ask the industry and the citizens of Europe on the side of the Commission? I know the Commission is starting a lot of citizens initiatives, is also like asking for information. What would be the take?
It's the same question for both. Well, it's an answer and it's a question, because the Commission is follows up on what the different stakeholders want to do and how they see the future being crystallized. So for us, in our we set up the frame. The Farm to Fork being one of these, the common agriculture policies being another, the common data space on agriculture being another. But then we need to articulate this in specific initiatives and sometimes the legislative initiatives. But before we do, we always go for consultation. So we have a broad consultation where we ask the different stakeholders exactly how they see that some specific file, some specific topic should go forward. And I think this is what we will be doing. So the question of Geraldine, I would bring it back to her as one of the stakeholders, obviously, that we will want to hear, as well as Simon, as well as others which are not possibly in this debate. And at the end of the day, it's also the co-decision maker and legislators who will actually decide. So I bring back the question to Geraldine, and I would actually ask the same question, which is, what do you want to see as part of our initiatives?
Geraldine, do you want to answer in 1 minute? Then I give it to Simon and Isabel.
Sure. Just a few examples. I think to revisit the legislation on drones will be a key asset. Also, the Commission taking a decision on gene editing will also be something very important for the future, just to give 2 examples.
Okay, thank you, Geraldine. Simon, what is on your side? I feel you, because I think we are almost the same age, and you bear the responsibility of representing 2 million young Europeans, farmers in Europe. So on their side, what would be the one thing that you would ask to policymakers and to the industry?
On a general perspective, I would say 2 things. Firstly, we need to define the strong meaning of an active farmer, making sure that we support the right farmers within Europe. And also for young farmers, access to land is still the biggest hit when it comes to being online, if you would say. Just a lot of people who are able to participate in this need access to land in order to grow or even to start from nothing. For me, as I said, my dream is to become, if you would call it, a real farmer. I want to have my own farm. And for that, I need to be able to access that land because today I'm still only running a large business for someone else. So those
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And now back to Isabel. Isabel, what is your takeaway out of this? Maybe a quick hint, and then we close.
I mean, what Simon said again, and then I go back to innovation just to say a few things. If someone wants to have the chance to become an entrepreneur in the agricultural sector, our duty is to create the framework to have as many as possible. So we need to create the framework so that a young person can decide to start a farm in Europe. That means access to finance, that means investment in digital framework, invest in infrastructure, creating the knowledge. But again, we need to have in our minds that our responsibility is to create opportunities so that others can take the risk and start a business. And in the agricultural level, we need to focus in creating that framework of opportunities, and creating also the net, the safety net, in case, as it can happen, that an entrepreneurial initiative doesn't succeed. And I truly believe that all the efforts need to be in that direction, and also in creating a and I wanted to focus on that, very competitive and innovative sector. We need to compete in the global world, and we need to give the tools to be really, really competitive and have the best investment in innovation in the agricultural sector, because that will create jobs, will create opportunities, and will help to develop many regions in Europe, because that will bring also investments in education, in many other sectors that will create also growth and jobs. So creating opportunities is our duty, and we need to work towards that.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you all. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Jorge. Thank you, Geraldine and Simon, for being here. Thank you to the almost 70 people that listen to us live. This is going to be shared anyway on our website. A few people were actually asking, how do we continue this conversation? And this is something that I'm always very proud that this is just the beginning, and then it plants a seed, and then it grows to being something interesting. So we will for sure be back in September with new things. And Isabel, I hope to be able to visit your vineyard with the other panelists. I'm sure we will be happy to try your products.
It'll be my pleasure, and to show you the beautiful region of Extremadura in Spain. So definitely, whenever we overcome this health crisis, I would love to organize something in Extremadura, for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Jorge, for being here. Thank you, Geraldine.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you also for my part.
Thank you, Jorge, and thank you, Simon. He's enjoying the sun in Sweden, he was telling me today. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day and have a lovely weekend. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.